Hello, and welcome to Same Crime, Different Time. I'm Jennifer Chambers. You know that I'm passionate about uncovering the truth. Here, we're taking that passion to the dark heart of the Pacific Northwest. As a true crime and historical writer, I've spent years immersed in the chilling archives of this region. Each week, we'll explore cases, both ancient and modern, of murder, unexplained events, strange places, and those who have simply vanished. We'll dig into the research, connecting the dots between past and present, revealing the threads of mystery that weave through our incredible, yet often unsettling, landscape. Prepare to be captivated as we discover that while times may change, the darkest aspects of human nature remain hauntingly the same. Hello, everyone. This is Jen Chambers, and I'm back with some really interesting stuff today. We've got an episode called Same Crime, Different Time, Spirits on the Midway. Stories from Oregon's amusement parks. Today we're stepping beneath the flashing lights of the Midway, past the cotton candy and the thrill rides, into the long shadows where laughter and ghosts share the same space. We'll start at Oregon's oldest continuously operating amusement park. It's called Oaks Amusement Park in Portland. It was opened in 1905. This was a place that was built for joy, for speed, for community, and yet also one that weathered floods, mysteries, reports of ghostly figures in turn-of-the-century clothing, and that strange phenomenon, children's laughter echoing when the park is closed. Then we'll pivot to a lesser-known but equally interesting story. The brief, storm-swept life of Lotus Isle, a 1930s amusement park with tragedy stacked high. Why do amusement parks make great ghost stories? Because they're liminal spaces. They're in between, somewhere between childhood and adulthood, between thrill and danger, between lightness and dark. Pull up a seat on the Ferris wheel. Hang on as the ride slows down, because we're looking for the places where the fun never fully ends, and neither does the story. Let's begin at Oaks. Part 1. The Oaks Amusement Park. History and Setting. The Oaks Amusement Park was conceived as a trolley park attraction to accompany the Lewis and Clark Centennial Exposition and opened on May 30th, 1905. That comes from the History Cooperative. It offered things like rides and a huge dance pavilion, a giant skating rink, and a ton of boat rides. It's all perched near the Willamette River. One of the authors I read called it Portland's Coney Island on the Willamette. It's really fun. It's very old-fashioned looking even today. Over the decades, it survived the Great Depression. It survived the changes that transportation brought and major floods. The 1948 flood, which was also known as the Vanport flood, submerged the park for 30 days. And it warped many of the rides and the floors of the skating rink. For instance, the History Cooperative says, quote, in 1948, the Vanport flood devastated the Oaks, warping most of the rides, and the water damage to the roller skating rink took 5 months to repair. In other words, this place that was built for fun was also often on the edge of the fury of nature. I mean, it's literally right on the shores of the Willamette, which is great, but I could also see the potential for it not being helpful. Now, the rink itself opened in 1906. Some sources say June 23rd, and it was built on that floodplain. After the damage of the 1948 flood, the engineers rebuilt the rink floor on iron barrels so that it could float if there were future floods, which is a fascinating idea. It seems counterintuitive, but so the layers of fun plus the layers of risk plus the layers of time make the park a rich place for stories, including creepy stories. Now, ghosts at Oak Amusement Parks. Part 2. Apparitions, Children, and Machines. If you wander Oaks Park late enough, or if it's closed for the day, some say, you'll hear the laughter of children far off when no one's there. Others claim to have seen a woman in the early 1900s style of clothing standing near the roller rink or the old skating pavilion. According to lists of haunted places in Oregon, Oaks Amusement Park is high up there in haunted places. They say, quote, Oaks Amusement Park patrons have reported seeing the apparition of a lone child in vintage clothing. I wasn't able to find a definitive newspaper article that quotes the eyewitnesses by name of that ghostly woman in the 1900s style clothing. But it's known as local folklore. There are also stories of malfunctioning equipment that have no clear mechanical reason. Sometimes rides will stop, sometimes the lights flicker, and that weird laughter of kids when the park is empty. Whether such things are really paranormal or simply just creaky echoes of age and old wood and memories, they still carry weight when a place is as old as that. One visitor from a Reddit thread that I found said, quote, Oaks Park, known as Coney Island of the Northwest, patrons have reported seeing apparitions of lone children in vintage clothing who disappear before their eyes, unquote. Whether you believe in the whole idea of ghosts or not, this place that survived floods, and it's got these rides that are, they've been repaired and a lot of them are new, but they're, decades old, changing ownership. It's got edges and creeks, and those creeks are all kind of like stories. Let's talk specifically about the rink, one of the oldest parts of the park. And it's the stage for many of these ghost stories that we found. Part 3, the rink. Now, the rink at Oaks is a story in itself. It opened early in 1906, and it was so damaged in that flood from 1948 that the wooden floor was floating on the river, basically. So it had to be weighted down, and then it was rebuilt on those weird iron barrels. So I imagine that makes it, I've been to the park, but I haven't been to the rink area. I know that it's actually, and this is totally Portland, there's roller derbies that compete in Portland and actually all around the area. But one of the oldest roller derby leagues is in Portland, which is awesome. It's really fun to watch if you get a chance to see it in your area. It's a blast, and these women are amazing. They are total badasses. I love it. But think about being at practice. Maybe you're alone in that rink after hours. The echo of your wheels. The live Wurlitzer pipe organ that's overhead. The stillness. And then you hear a door creak, or maybe you hear a distant whisper, or something moves in the shadows. Some employees and people who work there at night have talked about those kinds of things. One person said, and this is right from Oak Park's website itself, that the rink has flooded multiple times. And the memories definitely linger there. There are several different, and I can't cite them particularly, there aren't names that go with them, but there are a lot of people that talked about strange stuff that happens there. It's crazy. And as I say, I've been there. It has I've never been to Coney Island, but I've seen a lot of pictures. And it has a very early 1900s vibe. There's large boardwalks and the old-fashioned kind of rides. There's also like the big games that you can play. You could throw the balls, or you could, try and pop the balloons, those kinds of things. It's really fascinating. There's actually some great rides there, but I could see how that would be extremely creepy. There's a seating area that's right near the river that strikes me as, when the sun goes down, or maybe a long shadow comes over that picnic area, that could be extremely creepy. I definitely could see that. But it's a fun idea anyway. And I do recommend, it's great that we have an amusement park that's that old, and it's downtown Portland. It's one of those things that's almost hidden in plain sight. It's so funny that it's been so old. I've only been there a couple of times, and that's as an adult. I didn't even know about it growing up as a kid. But look for those kinds of things in your town. You never know. Now, while Oaks is still alive and operating, let's talk about Part 4, the Lotus Isle Amusement Park, which is a great name. The story of Lotus Isle Amusement Park is ghost heavy. It opened on June 28th, 1930, near the Columbia River, Hayden Island area. And it closed by 1932, so it was pretty fast and furious. Its history is just riddled with tragedies. A child drowned there in 1930, and the owner committed suicide almost, not exactly afterward, but soon afterward. This was a really kind of a weird place. It's been described as Oregon's most surreal amusement park. One of the pavilions had a roof that was shaped like a bulldog, and they had a giant dance hall that lasted for a while, the longest, the Peacock Dance Hall, that burned down. One author wrote that 100 years ago, that short-lived Coney Island-style amusement park was riddled with catastrophe. The ghost stories here lean into the collapsed dreams side of things. You know, kids play in phantom rides. Figures in white wander past the overgrowth. And there's this overwhelming sense of something that was gone. It's interesting, but by including the Lotus Isle, we get the contrast of a park still open and alive that have those creepy ideals versus a park that ended and became myth. There's some really good resources about Lotus Isle. A lot of crazy stuff happened there. It had about 40 attractions. There were things like bumper cars, and there was a log cabin looking cafe. There was a roller coaster. The child that died in 1930. A little boy named Ronald Ralston, who was 11. He fell off of a ladder that was underneath the main diving board, and he drowned there. And as I said, it was pretty soon afterwards. The next day, the owner of the park committed suicide in the park office by shooting himself in the heart. This guy who had built it, Edwin Platt, spent $1 gazillion constructing this whole island. It cost at the time between $500,000 and $600,000. And it hadn't been the biggest attention getter as it hoped that it would be. During the second season that it was open, an airplane crashed into the railway that was right in front of the ballroom. So the pilot and the people in the plane were hurt, but they did survive. Now, the park reopened in 1931 under different management, who spent about $100,000 in different attractions and improvements. And this was the 1930s, so he made something called the Dance-a-thon event in this big, giant Peacock ballroom. So, there were lots of dancers. And there was enough room in that ballroom for 6,600 dancers. That is a lot. They also had a giant 85-foot Ferris wheel and an Alpine rides-themed ride. I found this was a pretty funny fact. Around then, or the early part of 1931, the park bought a bull elephant named Tusco, who was actually from the Ringling Brothers Circus. And he got freaked out by a stunt plane that was flying low over the park, freaked out, and elephant on a rampage, literally, he destroyed a bunch of pavilions there. And he had actually previously gone on a rampage through a different part in Washington. And he ended up living the rest of his life at the Woodland Park Zoo in Seattle. Now, in August of 1931, almost a year after the tragic drowning and suicide, the ballroom burned to the ground. There was a transformer explosion, and it pretty much made the park go into bankruptcy. There are other amusement parks in Oregon. The Jantzen Beach Amusement Park was part of the Jantzen Beach Center. It was near Hayden Island, Portland, a part of Portland. They had a huge, like a merry-go-round and a fun house, a Big Dipper roller coaster. They had one of those hand-carved carousels, which is cool. There aren't a lot of ghost stories that I can hear that I know from here. But Jantzen Beach has a long history in Portland. And it's just worth noting because for a not heavily populated state, it's kind of cool that we've had several of these amusement parks. So Jantzen Beach is sort of a side note, actually. But the ghost stories are interesting. Amusement parks, the whole idea. This is part 5. Why do these amusement parks make great sites for ghost stories? These are spaces that were built for joy, right? They're paradoxical. They're built all around movement and noise and lights and laughter, but they also get old and they get abandoned. And that whole gap is fertile ground for the uncanny. I mean, how many different stories have you heard that are set in amusement parks, especially scary stories? In the case of the Lotus Isle, it was like a dream park that was cut short by tragedy, and it was a literal metaphor for a ghost story. But also think about these places as character. You know, they support, especially Oaks. There's decades of history there. The laughter could be the echo of all these past writers. It's kind of cool. It's interesting for me. I think about parks too. These ghost stories are about memory and joy and fragility. These are the same things that make up good life stories, redemption stories. I think they're fascinating and fun. And who knows? Here's where we wrap up. At Oaks, there's more than a century of history. And human voices entering. We've got the roller rink and the flood and the creaking of the wood and the weird ballroom on top of iron barrels. That's a place that's ripe for haunting. And Lotus Isle barely had a chance to shine before tragedy struck, so those myths are very potent. And then, I mean, think about the whole idea of amusement parks as being a threshold. They're a good metaphor for those liminal spaces, between past and present, laughter and fear, life and legend. If you ever find yourself in the Selwood neighborhood of Portland, which is near Oaks Park Way, go into Oaks Park. It's super fun. And definitely as dusk falls, you know, wait for the rides to light up with those big bulbs, big giant bulbs. Look at the abandoned corners, especially near the river there, and bring your curiosity. You never know. And hey, if you have any stories of your own from amusement parks, I would love to hear them. It's kind of a subgenre of things that I'm fascinated by. Amusement parks, I just love them. So if you have any stories, feel free to write in. Thanks so much for joining me on Same Crime, Different Time today. I'm Jen Chambers, and until next time, keep your eyes open, hold your flashlight steady, and remember, sometimes the scariest ride is the one you willingly step onto. Until next time, thanks for being with me.
Thanks for listening today. Please review and rate wherever you listen to podcasts. That really helps out the show. And please leave us a voicemail at the Spotify link. Also, you can always feel free to send us an email at scdtmail@gmail.com or www.jennifer-chambers.com.